introduction, I'd like to introduce myself, Megan Sadler, and my colleagues, Kara Fitzpatrick, Gwyn Thomas, and Paulina Nowicki. Between the four of us, we have previous work experience in the outdoor recreation, accommodation, tourism services, and attraction sectors. We are very excited today to introduce our case solution, a marketing plan that aims to recommend how BC can recruit and retain the number and caliber of workers in the tourism industry in the next 8 years. We need diversity of thought in the world to face new challenges. And the challenges expected from the predicted labor shortage is greater than ever before. The industry must ramp up its efforts and cast a wider net of recruitment to capture new markets.
The target markets that we have identified are students entering or at the post-secondary level, First Nations youth, and persons with disabilities. We have chosen these markets because they are core markets that are large and diverse. We have identified these markets not only because of their characteristics that we will address, but because of their volumes that are going to satisfy the impending 10% labor shortage. So our first target market group that we're going to present is that of domestic and international students. There are 440,000 British Columbian students in BC that are spread out over 21 educational institutions that offer tourism programs. According to Citizenship and Immigration Canada, 98,000 international students entered Canada in 2011. That is an all-time record. 19% of these students are currently in British Columbia. Also, about 68% of those students have made the transition to permanent resident status in the same year. This is more than half of these students that are choosing to live and work in British Columbia, and this is exactly what we are looking for. Looking for students that are going to then become employees, or going to employers, and then are growing to professionals in our industry. And it's also worthy to note that all these students are within the 18 to 35 age demographic, the youth demographic that we're aiming for.
We recommend that tourism be marketed as a top career choice to students entering or currently in post-secondary institutions. It should be well understood that an education specializing in tourism can guide students to a career path, help build their network, and branch into further career growth. We recommend that this be done through scholarships and sponsored student programs so that education can be accessible to everyone. We also recommend marketing tourism to younger people, such as people in elementary schools and high schools. High school students could participate in student case competitions just like this one. They would bring unique perspectives, get to network with industry professionals, and talk to students like ourselves about the programs that we're in. Our final recommendation comes from Japan. It's a strategy that they're currently using right now. They are focusing on students 1 year prior to their graduation from post-secondary students. Different companies, not only in tourism, are holding seminars to talk to students and try to get them to choose that as their career path. In some cases, alumni will take students out for dinner and answer any questions that they may have, and 1 or 2 students are nominated every year for internships at those companies. The year prior to the implementation of these practices, 34% of students applied to 40 or more jobs because they were so unsure about what they wanted to do with their futures. The year after these practices were implemented, that number went down to 1% applying to 40 or more jobs because students were more confident and comfortable with their skills and they knew what they wanted to do.
So our next market is First Nations. There's 196,070 people that make up this population in BC. This is 4.5% of the population. Of this number, approximately 13% are unemployed. This is a very young population that we can use to recruit to the tourism industry. First Nations are already a very invaluable partner in the tourism industry. It's a group of people that represent a unique culture. Tourists come to BC for the authentic First Nations experience. This is a group that can fill this market need. Some of the positive outcomes that can happen through this are increasing business and sustainability of culture, heritage, and language. So there's already an Aboriginal Tourism Association of BC that is a contact for First Nations people looking for tourism jobs. Our recommendation is to have a physical facility where people can go and talk face-to-face with employment officers. This is where they can get advice on resume preparation, interview preparation, and where the jobs actually are. So working in these facilities will be employment officers, and they will go out to the First Nations people and promote the jobs and let them know what is out there. We also suggest that there is a partnership with this association and the Visitor Centres of Tourism BC. This is where they can have their offices for the facility. This is being implemented in Australia currently with the Warkambara. This is the Victorian government's Indigenous employment strategy. They want Indigenous people for their employment. They have employment officers who promote the jobs and are a contact for these people. Another example is right here in British Columbia. Spirit Ridge Resort and Vineyard is associated with the Osoyoos Indian Band. They go out and they talk to the Indian band and get some of the people to work for them. And this just goes to show as Spirit Ridge is one of the best resorts in all of Osoyoos.
Persons with disabilities are underutilized in the tourism industry. There are 360,000 people with of working age with disabilities in BC, which represents 8% of the entire population of BC. These employees are rated the same or better than employees without disabilities. Yet from a survey of 42 hotels across Canada, out of over 11,000 employees, only 58 had disabilities. This is 0.5% of that employee population. The reason for this disparity is because there are a lot of myths involved people with disabilities. There's the idea that it's going to cost more to train them to deal with their mobility, accommodations, and for retention. But in studies and in case studies and research, it shows that this isn't actually true. It almost never costs anymore, and even when it does, in 10% of the cases where there is a mobility issue, it might have a fixed cost of $500. But there's many advantages of employing people with disabilities. For one thing, they're very inspirational to their coworkers. When coworkers see that they're people overcoming the disabilities and facing these challenges, and it actually improves the morale of people working. There are also it also leads to many new approaches to doing business, because people with disabilities have different challenges that they need to face, and this leads to innovation and also leads to improved efficiency. There are also many accessible technologies that were originally created for people with disabilities and are now used by people all over. A great example of this is a typewriter, which was originally developed for a blind secretary. But there isn't another advantage of employing people with disabilities is the economic advantage. A survey across the U.S. found that 32% of households said they were extremely or very likely to decide to go to a business that had people with disabilities rather than a company that didn't have people with disabilities. Marriott Hotels in the U.S. is viewed as the preferred hotel for people with disabilities, not because they can accommodate people with disabilities, but because they employ people with disabilities. In Canada, people with disabilities represent $25 billion in spending power. There's a lot of resources out there that dispel these myths. A great example is Workable Solutions, which is a BC organization that actually has a great workbook that helps people, employees, or employers, learn how to properly recruit and retain people with disabilities. But this information isn't getting out there. So therefore what we would like to propose is the BC Disability Tourism Association. What this is it's going to be modeled after the Aboriginal Tourism Association. So essentially there's going to be three factors involved. There's going to be a resource for employers who want to find out about information about how to properly recruit and retain people with disabilities. It's also going to serve as a resource for employees to find out which businesses are actually employing people with disabilities and can accommodate people with disabilities. It's just going to advocate on behalf of people with disabilities to these businesses and let them know that these are viable people to be working for them. And finally, it's going to serve as a place where tourists coming to BC can find out where are people actually employing people with disabilities so that they can choose to use their money at those establishments. By creating this organization, BC can become a leader in employing persons with disabilities in tourism.
Stakeholders. Their interest is invested in our plan and the results of our plan. It is through our marketing plan that we are the communication channels to our three target markets. Also, we are communicating the needs and wants of our stakeholders, this in order to improve their profitability, improve their growth. Our plan casts a wide net in terms of methods of communications, and we've explored such as traditional media, so that's in TV and print, social media, and we find very importantly to have a strong web presence. Also above, you'll see that we prepared an annual working budget. For each target market, there is an allocated cost, and our total cost in the corner over there estimates or predicts a total budget of about $565,000.
So even if our strategy fails and we only get 2% of each of these markets, we will still be filling more than 12,000 jobs in the industry. So with the recruitment of First Nations, people with disabilities, as well as creating awareness within school systems, BC can satisfy the impending labor shortage that is going to happen. From the wise words of Steve Jobs, innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower. And if BC follows these strategies, they will not only be following the best practices from around the world, they will also be creating them. Thank you so much for listening to our presentation. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask.